2023-031. The applicant is Richard Sturmer. The request is a reclassification from the A1 Agriculture District to E5 Estate District with a variation to reduce the lot frontage from 330 feet to 267.4 feet. This is part of PIN number 11-15-200-012. The address is Hawthorne Road, Marengo, Illinois, and it's located on the west side of Hawthorne Road, approximately 2/5 of a mile south of Carmack Road, Marengo, Illinois, in Marengo Township. And I just realized, Kim, I didn't get the okay.
All right, I probably just let you for a few words.
Okay, good. So at this point, I'll have the members of the zoning board introduce themselves with the township in which they reside, starting on my left.
Robert Kozin, Algonquin Township.
Donald Smolenski, Grafton Township.
Charlie Eldridge, Richmond Township.
I'm Linnea Kuster from Alden Township.
Vicki Gardner, Nunda Township.
Kurt Schnabel, Riley Township.
Thomas Jers, Coral Township.
This petition has been reviewed and the following items have been received prior to today's scheduled hearing. The publisher's certificate of publication from a newspaper is dated July 15, 2023. The affidavit of posting was signed and the date posted was July 24, 2023. Affidavit of mailing was signed and the date mailed was July 12, 2023, all meeting ordinance requirements. The survey has been checked against the petition, legal notice, and publication in the newspaper, and all three match. Filing fees have been paid. The endangered species consultation was not required for this petition. The McHenry County Soil and Water Conservation District report has been received. Please refer to NRI number L23-0058-4518. For anybody who's members of the public that are here as well as the petitioner, I'll just run through how the hearing works. So the petitioner presents their evidence, and then they're asked questions by members of the board and then staff, and then if any member of the public has a question based on the testimony given, they have 3 minutes to come up to the microphone on the right and ask questions of the testimony. After that, the staff will give their report, and then at the end of the hearing, if there's anybody here that wants to give a comment on the petition, they can do that as well. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. McKenna. Oh, I gotta swear everybody in. If anybody is going to be speaking today, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do.
Okay. Now I'll turn it over to Mr.
Thank you very much. My name is Terry McKenna. I'm here on behalf of the petitioner Richard Sturmer. And as indicated, we are seeking a reclassification from the A1 district to E5 with a variance for road frontage. I guess briefly, I'd like to call Mr. Sturmer as a witness. So, Richard, if you could just state and spell your name for the record.
Richard Sturmer, S-T-E-R-M-E-R. That's M as in Mary.
And what is your address?
2513 Hawthorne Road, Marengo, Illinois.
And you are the owner of the property that's the subject of our petition?
That's correct. I and my wife.
All right. And how old a man are you?
88.
All right. And you would like for me to take over from this point?
Correct.
And you'll hit me if I say anything that's incorrect?
Yes, sir.
That's what the cane is for.
With the
right?
Okay. This petition, as stated, is part of PIN 11-15-200-012. The overall parcel is depicted on the slide. The property, or the portion of the property that is the subject of this petition, is outlined in yellow, and that's the northern of the two parcels. There are two lots separated by an access lane, but they only have one pin. The parcel that is the subject of this petition consists of 8.093 acres. It has 267.4 feet of road frontage along Hawthorne Road. The Sturmers have owned the property since 1968. Mr. Sturmer lives in the parcel of the property, the southernmost portion of the property that's outlined in kind of an orange there. And he's lived there since 1969. They purchased the property in 1968. built the house there, and then have lived there ever since. Mr. Turner's daughter, Jennifer, who's here also, lives in the parcel that is directly north of the property that is the subject of our petition, so just north of the property outlined in yellow there. The property, as I mentioned, was not improved when Sturmers purchased it in 1968. He built the house there and moved in 1969. When he bought the property, he purchased not only the parcel as it's configured there, but also the parcel that is west of his residence and just south of the subject property. So that house there that's in the corner, that was all part of the original parcel that he bought. In 1970, he sold off that portion to his sister, who subsequently built a house on that property. And again, that property is west of his residence. When he sold off that parcel, he was left with the two parcels as they presently exist with one pin. At that time, he never tried to create a second buildable parcel or a second buildable site for the northern parcel. At the time, as part of this process, we obtained a buildability letter from the county to see if we had to go through this process or whether the parcel was buildable as it was. The buildability letter confirms that in 1970, when these parcels were created, the zoning ordinance required a lot size of 48,000 square feet and road frontage of 160 feet. So at the time that these parcels were created, both of those parcels as they exist would have been legal buildable sites. So potentially he could have deeded one parcel to himself even to divide it up, and we would have a buildable site for the property that's the subject of our petition. Similarly, in the intervening years, up until the recent version of the UDO, it probably could have simply gone through an A2 process, because the back half of the property is all wooded and thus not suitable for agricultural uses, and it contains more than 5 acres. However, we didn't do either of those things, which is why we're here now. So we're left with this 8-acre site that's zoned A1 that presently cannot be built on. They do not presently use the property for any agricultural purposes. They had horses previously, but they haven't used the property for horses for at least 10 years. The usable parcel for ag purposes is about half of the 8-acre parcel, so about 4 acres, so it's not feasible for row crops. It's not adjacent to any other fields. And to use it for animals would mean having somebody else's animals on site, which potentially could lead to liability issues. If the property were rezoned to E5, that certainly wouldn't preclude the next owner from being able to use the property for horses, but they would have to comply with the E5 requirements. I would direct your attention to my map here, or my aerial photograph. That shows, again, our parcel is outlined in blue on that, and all of those red dots are parcels that are already improved with single-family residences. It does not include the smaller lots across from on the east side of Hawthorne that are A1 but are buildable in their because they've been in existence in that capacity since 1978. The staff report indicated that there is one parcel zoned E5 within a quarter mile of the property. That's the third house in west of Hawthorne Road on Carmack. All of the other parcels that are shown on Hawthorne Road are zoned A1 except for one A2 parcel. On the west side of Hawthorne Road, there are 21 buildable or 21 zoning parcels, not including the petitioner zoning parcel. Of those 21, 19 are improved with single-family residence. Of the 19 parcels that are improved with single-family residence, only 2 have 330 feet of frontage. Everybody else has less than 330 feet of frontage. All told, in the mile or half-mile stretch north of and south of our property on Hawthorne Road, there are 27 single-family residences. That doesn't include the 34 homes off of Constance and Greenbrier Lane immediately adjacent to our property to the south, nor does it include the 8 homes in the subdivision at the northwest corner of Hawthorne and Carmack, nor does it include any of the homes off of Pringle Road there, all of which are shown within about a half mile of our parcel. Given the surrounding uses up and down Hawthorne, the existing subdivisions, which again, according to staff, were not, supposed to take into consideration as a trend of development, but nevertheless they exist. We feel that rezoning the parcel to E5 would not change the agricultural nature of this immediate area. Instead, it would be more in keeping with what is actually out there in terms of single-family homes on smaller A1 parcels. And again, it's our position that rezoning the property to E5 would be consistent with what is there in the immediate vicinity. Our position is that the proposed use is compatible with the existing uses and zoning designation of nearby properties. The proposed zoning designation would allow the property to be improved with a single-family residence. There's, again, numerous other parcels in the immediate surrounding area that are either developed already with a single-family residence or that could be permitted for the construction of a residence without having to go through this process. The property is 8.093 acres. Again, there's limited value from a purely agricultural sense use. There's really no use for, again, row crops, and petitioners no longer have animals that the property could be used for. Given the size of the property, it's the economic viability of using it for an agricultural use, there is no benefit to the health, safety, welfare of the public keeping it under the current A1 zoning. The property has been vacant for as long as, or at least that portion of the property has been vacant for as long as the petitioners owned the property in the 1970s. There's some discrepancy of exactly when they constructed the barn that is out there. The public need for the proposed use is the transformation of an 8-acre parcel into a home site, taking it from a parcel that could potentially fall fallow for disuse as an agricultural use into a viable real estate tax income producing use. And while technically not consistent with the 2030 plan, the fact is that there are, again, numerous other properties in the immediate vicinity that presently enjoy exactly the same use that we're seeking here. In terms of the approval standards with respect to the variation, the parcel has existed with the 267.4 feet of road frontage since it was created in 1970. When it was created in 1970, that was adequate frontage under the then current zoning ordinance. Our position is that the E5 district is the most appropriate district to allow one home to be constructed on this property, which again is why we're seeking the variance for the road frontage to try to seek another zoning classification that would meet the existing frontages out there. Would mean that there would be the possibility of more than one home being constructed, which is not the intent. Again, the property has existed like this since 1970. The reduction in the road frontage from the 330-foot requirement, again, is in keeping with with 17 of the 21 improved parcels along Hawthorne Road that all have less than 330 feet of frontage. The parcel is not economically viable, again, as an agricultural parcel. The hardship was created not by the petitioner, but when the parcel was created, it would have been pretty simple just to get 2 pins. Instead, there was only 1 pin that was issued, which is why we have this situation now. The granting of the variation would not be detrimental to the public health or welfare or injurious to other properties or improvements in the neighborhood. Again, other properties exist with less than 330 feet of road frontage. The variation would not, or will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, increase congestion on the public streets, increase the risk of fire to adjacent property, or substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. Ultimately, petitioner's goal is for the property to be developed with a single-family residence in keeping with the other residences in the immediate area. And finally, the variation would not confer upon the petitioner a special privilege that is not available to other property owners within the same zoning district. Again, just given the number of parcels with less than 330 feet of frontage. Did you want to add anything else?
No.
Thank you, that's all.
Questions from the board, starting on my right, Mr. Jers.
Terry, that was such a good presentation. I feel like giving you a round of applause. I don't think that's ever been done here.
No, not to me. Not to me.
It would just go to your head and you'd charge him more money. So, the Hawthorne, it should be called a sub-area, part of McHenry County, and we've got several of them, mostly on the west side of McHenry County. We've got, Coral, Harmony, there's Franklinville, you've got Lawrence. And the Hawthorne School was the center of that community.
You gotta have a question.
Well, if I have a question, it's going to be like, what took you? But I understand. It fits. You're doing, I don't have any questions for you, but I understand where you got there and how you got there. And it was just kind of a perfect storm of procrastination to get you here today.
Thank you.
That's it.
Mr. Schneider.
I do have a question or two for you. I don't think anything too heavy duty. I'd like to ask Mr. Sturmer, we can all see that there's some kind of a barn. It's called out as a frame barn on that subject property that we're discussing here today. Can you tell me what you know about that barn?
Well, I built it back in mid-70s, I believe. And we did have horses at the time. And the other parts to this was the horses were into the woods area, and the other part I was raising some hay, so I wouldn't have to buy hay. I got the local farmer to bale it for me.
Did you have some kind of a corral at the barn?
Yes.
Is that now gone? Or-
It's a fenced off area, it's overgrown, and it's all of it,
Has the barn fallen into disrepair, would you say?
well, I've done some work on it, but could use other things, and,
It's not going to become a wedding hall anytime soon.
no, it's, I wondered,
All right.
should I tear it down, or?
I think that gives us all a real good idea. I just have one last question. The home to the north, what year was that built?
The home to the north.
My house, 19.
You'd have to identify
Oh,
yourself.
Jennifer Trotz.
Were you
daughter.
sworn in?
Yes.
Yes.
1998, 99.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Gardner.
Okay, so that clears that part up of my question. I just wanted to clarify that it's the parcel in the center that is now vacant and that you want to change to E5, is that correct? The one to the south is occupied by the petitioner,
Yes.
and the one to the north is occupied by the petitioner's daughter, and then there's something to the east with the petitioner's sister.
Was.
And that was,
Okay.
it's been sold.
Okay, so this one has never had a home on it or anything else?
That's correct.
Has this property ever been farmed? I mean, other than the hay you were growing for the horses?
When I bought it, there was corn stubble from a year or two before I bought it.
Okay.
But that involved from,
My piece still.
the backside of the south end of my piece of property all the way up to Carmack. And there was a farmhouse up there that he did farm that whole piece, and he farmed the other side of Hawthorne, the east side of Hawthorne.
Okay, so it looks from the picture that the west end of this parcel is wooded, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and it has always been wooded since you bought it?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's all I have, thank you.
Mr. Eldridge,
I have no questions at this time.
Mr. Smolinski,
I have no questions at this time.
Mr. Kozin.
Yes, thank you. Just to follow up on the wooded, what quality of the wood, is there a description on what hardwoods, just
Well,
is?
it's mainly, well, there's some old oak trees and I think there's a few walnut in there.
Thank you, I have no further questions.
And my questions are for staff. Does any member of the public have a question? Okay. Well, then we'll move to the report by staff. Ms. Kurtzman.
For the record, I'm Anna Kurtzman, Senior Planner with McHenry County. The property, as we've noted already, is currently zoned A1. The predominantly zoned areas are also A1 along this area here. There are a few scattered A2s. The only E districts are to the south along the subdivision there. The future land use designation shows that those lots in subdivision are estate, isolated estate, so we are not to consider those as part of our review today. All the other parcels that you see that are in yellow and brown and blue up there on the screen, those are parcels that you can consider as part of your deliberation today. The future land use does show this as an area that is supposed to remain in an agricultural state going forward. Because the area is predominantly rural in nature, that our future land use map is showing this as a state classification. Staff is recommending that this petition not be granted.
Does any members of the board have questions for staff? I think you answered my questions in your report. So, is there a closing statement, Mr. McKenna?
Yes, just briefly, again, the 2030 plan listing this as agricultural doesn't, in this case, necessarily take into consideration the 27 homes that are up and down Hawthorne Road, most of which are on lots that are smaller than this. This petition and our request, we feel, is in keeping with the immediate area. Will do nothing to change the area. It will do nothing to lessen the agricultural nature of the area. We're just looking for one home like all of the rest of them up and down Hawthorne. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, then we'll move to the voting portion of this hearing. Again, this is application 2023-031, applicant Richard Sturmer, and the request is for a reclassification from the A1 Agriculture District to E5 Estate District with a variation to reduce the lot frontage from 330 feet to 267.4 feet. The address is Hawthorne Road, Marengo, Illinois, and it's on the west side of Hawthorne Road, 2/5 of a mile south of Carmack Road in Marengo Township. So at this time, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Jers, second by Mr. Eldridge. Discussion, Mr. Jers.
We can have discussion.
The reason for my approval is it fits with the neighborhood. The neighborhood is rural residential, and it is in a community known as Hawthorne. There is no benefit to farming it anymore if it ever was farmed. The petitioner did have horses. I can understand there was a stable. The 4 acres is not enough to do anything with. The remaining 4 acres of woods, you know, is deer cover. And the variation on the footage doesn't mean anything really. There are homes on that road that have lesser road frontage than this. I think it's a perfect fit for what you're doing.
Mr. Schnabel.
I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Jurs. Mr. Sturmer, you've been here long before the county had the land use plan. I understand your attorney explaining the story of the past of what's happened with these PIN numbers and more or less why it's happened. I just want to say, I will be supporting this petition.
Ms. Gardner.
I agree with what's been stated so far. Apparently, when this parcel was created, it was created with the intention to build on it because it fit the parameters at that time for that. Given the area and the homes along that road, it seems logical to me to continue that and not have a farm in the meantime. It feels to me as if the 2030 plan did not look closely at that particular piece of property or that particular road even, because it looks like those houses have been there for a long time, and to say that should be ag means, you know, wipe all those out and start over again, which doesn't make sense to me. So I am in favor of this.
Mr. Eldridge.
Thank you. I do think that to a considerable extent, the issue that is before us today was self-inflicted by Mr. Sturmer for failing to follow the changes in zoning and make timely changes that could have made it qualified it for as a buildable lot up to today. And I think it is important to distinguish this parcel and this petition from others that we may receive seeking similar relief in other areas. However, I do think that what Mr. Jurs and my colleagues have said is well taken in this particular spot, that as a practical matter, this is going to be either a buildable lot or nothing. And there are a great many homes adjacent to the property, and except going significantly west of the property, there isn't much in the way of commercial agriculture. And while what staff has said is well taken, that this clearly is not consistent with the 2030 plan or the Beyond 2030 update, I think in this case it is appropriate to grant both the zoning change and the variation, and therefore I will vote in favor of the petition.
Mr. Smolinski.
I agree with the comments that have been made by my colleagues here, and I will be supporting the petition.
Mr. Cozen.
I will be supporting this petition. In addition, noting that I appreciate the concerns about creating a path of practice that may undermine the ordinance of this county, but recognize that that is what a variance is for. That the relief being requested is 60 feet, to which I would challenge that anyone standing on that road would notice the distinction between this lot and anywhere else. As well as to note that in the history recounted to us, Concurrently, both the state and the federal government offered an opportunity of a conservation easement, which may be a tool that would be useful back in 1997 to some of that hardwoods and so forth. But it seems that this family can well manage its own without where we sit today. And so without further holding this microphone, I too will be supporting this petition.
And I would say also that normally I would not support this in any way, but this is a very unique situation that I think would not apply to other areas in the country that are near country subdivision that you can't use as a precedent for development. But because of the uniqueness of this property and what happened and his ability to, as Mr. Eldridge said, could have been handled and made a buildable parcel. Reluctantly, I am going to also support this because I also really feel like we need to follow the land use plan and the zoning ordinance, but this is a very unique situation, so I am going to be supporting the petition. So I'll call for the vote. Mr. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes.
Mr. Smolinski?
Yes.
Mr. Jers?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. This will go to the county board 7-0 approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys got to get
So
much
now
more
let's
often.
pause.
Yeah. We're all set. Congratulations.
All right, well, I guess I won't